You are lying on the cold wooden planks of a longship. Your wrists are tied. Your ankles burn where the ropes cut into your skin. Around you, the smell of seawater mixes with sweat, blood, and smoke from the village still burning behind you. You hear footsteps on the deck. Slow, heavy, deliberate, a shadow falls across you. It's the Viking who dragged you onto this ship. Tall, broad-shouldered, his beard matted with blood that isn't his. Behind him, another raider drops the severed head of your neighbor onto the deck like it's just another piece of cargo. This isn't a nightmare. This isn't a legend. This is what happened on Viking raids across Britain, Ireland, Francia, and the Baltic for over 300 years. What I'm about to show you is the part of Viking history they never teach in school, the system of terror, captivity, and exploitation that happened after the longships sailed away. This isn't mythology. This isn't Hollywood. This is documented by medieval clerics, sagas, law codes, and the archaeology of Viking slave hubs beneath places like Dublin, Hedeby, Birka, Kaupang, and Novgorod. If you stay until the end, you will never look at Vikings the same way again. Hollywood lied to you about Vikings. They show you the battles, the glory, the drinking halls, Ragnar, shield maidens, honor, and destiny. But they never show you what happened in the hours after a raid ended. When the screams faded, the houses burned to embers, and the survivors, mostly women, were dragged to the shore like livestock. Because for Vikings, the raid wasn't over when the fighting stopped. It only ended when the longship was full, with gold, with weapons, and with human beings. The Old Norse word for slave was threll. It didn't mean servant, it meant property, war prizes, trade goods, and yes, something far darker. But before we go deeper, do something for me. Look at the like button right now. If you believe hidden history deserves to be told, no matter how uncomfortable, hit that button and comment where in the world you're watching from. Because this story isn't just about the Vikings. It's about what people with total power do when no one can stop them. Now, let's step onto the longship. To understand what happened to female captives, you first have to understand what Vikings were really doing on these raids. This wasn't random savagery. It was an economic system, a supply chain, a business model. Vikings raided for treasure. Yes, but the most profitable export of the Viking Age was people. A single young woman could sell for the equivalent of years of a farmer's income. A skilled captive could be traded in distant markets all the way to the Abbasid Caliphate. Captives were currency, and capturing them was built into Viking logistics exactly the way Romans engineered their arenas. When Vikings attacked a monastery or a village, the process was brutally efficient. Men of fighting age, killed. Elderly, ignored. Children, taken, if small enough to transport. Women, the most valuable cargo, taken first. Medieval chroniclers describe this with horrifying bluntness. A monk in Francia wrote, "They took the women as one takes cattle, binding them with cords, striking those who resisted." The Anglo-Saxon Chronicle simply states, "Women were carried off for the use of the raiders." Not metaphorically, not symbolically, literally. Now comes the part almost no documentary dares to touch. What actually happened on the ship? Because the longship wasn't just a transport vessel, it was a floating prison. And the sagas, the law codes, and the few surviving testimonies paint a picture almost too disturbing to believe. Captives, especially young women, were tied near the center of the ship, where warriors slept and ate. Some were chained to the mast, others to iron rings built into the hull, still visible on excavated ships from Oseberg and Roskilde. But here's the part that should chill you. Viking law codes explicitly state that a slave taken in war had no rights. None. A thrall could not testify in court, could not refuse any order, could not defend themselves, could not prevent being used as the raider saw fit. Because legally, they were not people, they were loot. And on the Longship, the men who'd just risked their lives in battle believed they were entitled to rewards. The sagas use vague phrases, radast a, to seize, hafa hana, to have her, taka hana til filgdar, to take her for company. Modern historians know exactly what these euphemisms mean. A woman on a longship was not a passenger, she was a resource. And this wasn't the act of a few monstrous individuals. This was routine, a system, an expectation. In the sagas, Viking chieftains promised their men wealth, cattle, and women as recruitment incentives. That phrasing is repeated across multiple sources. Women were counted alongside animals and precious metals. Even worse, some sources indicate women were assigned by rank. The higher the status of the warrior, the more control he had over the captives. And just like Roman gladiators had privileges of the victor, Vikings had their own chilling version. Fangamansretter, the right of the captor. This meant the man who physically seized the captive had first claim to her. You want to know how normalized this was? Old Norse poems joke about it. Joke. One skald wrote that a warrior returned home with silver wine and 2 weeping maidens. Another brags that a Viking took a priest's daughter as easily as taking a lamb. Medieval clerics were not joking. They wrote entire sermons pleading with God to spare our women from the Northmen. One Irish chronicle says simply, "The Vikings came, and the women of the town wailed." But here's where the story gets darker. Because the nightmare didn't end when the ship reached land. It only got worse. The Viking world was filled with slave markets, actual commercial hubs designed for processing and selling captives. Archaeologists have uncovered the remains of these places. Dublin, a slave-trading superpower built by Vikings. Hedeby, full of holding pits and iron shackles. Birka, human trade docks beside the warehouses. Novgorod, where Slavic captives were funneled south to Arab markets. These places had infrastructure, pens, chains, stone cells, and iron rings anchored into the walls, identical to the ones beneath Roman arenas. But Dublin's archaeology reveals something even worse. Female captives were kept separate from males, in small, reinforced buildings, some with raised benches, some with scratch marks on the walls. Sound familiar? History has patterns. Empires repeat the same horrors. And now we reach the most terrifying part of all. What happened to the women after they were sold? Some became domestic slaves. Some became agricultural labor. Some were forced into concubinage. Some bore children whose fathers were raiders. The sagas tell stories of chieftains with many women taken in raids. Some were later freed. Many were not. Most were simply erased. No names, no stories, just numbers in a trade ledger. But archaeology remembers. In Birka, archaeologists found a grave of a young woman with a broken jaw, bound ankles, and the traces of iron shackles. In Dublin, they found human remains with rope burns on the wrists. In the Baltic, mass graves of captives killed when they were no longer worth transporting. The stones remember what the chronicles tried to sanitize. And here's the part people never think about. The Viking Age didn't end because morality improved. It ended because the economics changed. Christian kingdoms fortified their coasts. Trade shifted. Captives became harder to acquire. The system died because it became inconvenient, not because it was wrong. Today, tourists pose beside reconstructed longships, buy horned helmet souvenirs, and drink Viking mead at themed restaurants. Almost none of them know what happened in the dark spaces of those same ships. The chains, the screams, the women whose lives ended on the open sea, between burning villages and foreign slave markets. The sagas don't tell their stories, but the archaeology does. And now, you know the truth too. If this revealed a side of Viking history you never heard before, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. Because we're going to keep uncovering the histories the world tried to bury. Drop a comment with your thoughts, and I'll see you in the next investigation into the darkest corners of the past.